Hi friends, I'm Les Mood, your host. Welcome to the Energy Independent Show, where we cover product reviews, interviews, and hot energy news. Today we have a special guest, Vic Burconak from Koben Systems. I like to call Koben Systems the brains behind the smartest electrical panel in the world. It's simply genius, and we're happy to have him on today. Thank you for coming on to talk with us about your innovation, Vic.
Well, thank you very much, Les. I'm honored to be on here. I've been watching your show for a while now. We've been communicating for a while, so it's great to be on here. I'm excited and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I remember the first time I joke about it. The first time you blew my mind about Koben Systems. I was on vacation and I found myself wanting to go get to work and work on some of these Koben systems. It's really amazing what it could do. So for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you in the energy industry?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, about myself a little bit, I'm the founder, president, and CEO of Koben Systems, and I come from a background of engineering, electrical, and I was an electrician, and I was a custom home builder, and for about a decade. And I've always looked at new ways of doing things. And one of the frustration points I had was when we were wiring a home and putting in these mechanical panels. It was like a spider's web of connection. I said, God, there's got to be a better way to pull all this together. And, in the late 90s, it was, the emergence of this stuff just started to come about. And, I started diving in, and one thing led to another, and met people and ideas. And, the panel started to emerge. And, by 2004, 2005, it was, hey, we have a genius solution. And fast forward, and here we are. I mean, we're selling in 7 countries. We've got manufacturing operations in Israel. We're manufactured there in Manila and head office here, and soon to have a location in California. It's all good things. It's working according to plan, as they say.
That's great. Well, you've obviously been at it a while to get such a great name like Genius. Early on in the game, and to be so far ahead is really, really amazing. And speaking of, names, can you tell us about Koben Systems, the story behind the name and your role there?
Well, my role here is president, CTO, and CEO, and I look after a lot of the, activity by getting Genius out in the marketplace, working along with my CTO in Israel, overseeing manufacturing. And Koben is actually pretty funny, when you think back when people are venturing into entrepreneurship and creating a company. I think a lot of emphasis and time is spent on a company name. I mean, I've been guilty of that too, so I'm sitting there and thinking, wow, what am I going to call this? And because we're dealing with the environment, we're dealing with the future, our kids, it's going to be our kids' future. I've got 2 boys now. They're very close to 15 and 18, and the eldest is Kobe and the youngest is Ben. So I'm sitting and I turn and I look at them, and with me, you look at your kids and you know who they are automatically. So I'm thinking Kobe and Ben, and I look and I put the 2 together, and boom, Koben. And I go, hey, that sounds great. I mean, they're my bosses now. They're going to take over, hopefully. So I thought it was only appropriate, and I saved myself thousands of dollars from dealing with a consultant and brand experts. So that's how Koben came about.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. It's such a legacy name. It's actually a really good name, and it's really great to hear the story there. I mean, if you're trying to change the world, what better way for leaving the world a better place to your children with the name after them? That's kind of cool. So getting to, what state we're in, really, there's this traditional utility model and it's becoming obsolete. Can you kind of tell us about, the the status of the utility market and where Koben comes in?
Well, one of the reasons why Genius was developed and evolved to where it is today, in my background and my practical background, there was a culmination of things. And when I look at the industry today, where it was 12 years ago, where it is today, I mean, it's a new game for energy retailers everywhere. The traditional utility model, in our perspective, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to share the same viewpoint, is it's obsolete, it's dead, it's done. It's time to move on to new. When we look at all the technologies today, living off the grid is going to become mainstream. These utilities that adopt new technologies and a new way of doing business, they're going to form new partnerships in different industries that, like Genius, will align a lot of the stakeholders in these sectors. They'll be able to forecast demand and supply much better with these new tools. I mean, my God, we are now into the world of IoT, the digital era. Our panel is the first basically solid state for microgrid, nanogrid, for residential, small, medium-sized, industrial and commercial settings. I mean, why, when we look at our whole energy area and homeowners, I mean, homeowners are very quickly going to become energy experts with all the tools available. When we go shop, we use a credit card. We get a credit card statement. We get bank statements. We get telephone bills with a complete breakdown of everything that we buy and consume. And, there's a big question that was always in my mind, and it's still very relevant today. Would you pay your credit card bill without seeing a breakdown of the charges? I can guarantee 99.99% of the time you wouldn't. So why are you paying your electricity bill in the same way when a lot of it is, are assumptions on your prior energy use? So this, with a lot of other, evangelizing, where energy users will become evangelists for the utility, to be able to have transparency, to be able to make the decisions on their own rather than being dictated to. I just think this is a no-brainer as to where we're moving in the industry.
Right. Yeah, I recall the first time you told me about it, and as a developer myself, now moving more into into what we're doing now, I knew there were solutions out there waiting to find problems, and I think yours has, and the amount of control and the independence you put into the hands of the consumer is really amazing, and the resilience that comes about, the ability to not need the utility when things happen, but also to save money. So from an independence perspective, I really appreciate it, but also there's huge benefit to developers as well in what they can offer their clients and new business models that can be built on top of the Genius panel. But can you explain more on the customer side how customers can become, with the Genius panel, the energy experts themselves?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Les. When customers today, there's such a deluge of technology. When I look at installations and when I listen to people pitching, or customers trying to find, a good solution, it's very intimidating. It can be very scary because there's so much there. What we do is we simplify that process. We give the homeowner or the energy consumer the tools to be able to make informed decisions and choices when it comes to their electricity use. For instance, we are holistic in the sense that because it's solid state, once the parameters are set up, whether you have solar and or battery or an EV charger or fuel cell or wind or generator, any one of those energy sources we can integrate, and we predefine when they're going to be used. So once that's done, our system takes over, and it doesn't bother you or bother the homeowner in saying, hey, what do you want to do in this situation? No, it's smart enough and intelligent enough that it'll automatically make those choices for you. So you don't have to rely on a the human element to interact to achieve that outcome. And plus, we don't use any of these gadgets or .com parts, what we call it, smart switches or smart plugs. I mean, God, by the time you plug it into every receptacle to control every light, everything plugged in, I mean, you're going to be spending, a couple $1,000s. So you can't put good money after bad here. You have to be able to, wisely choose your spending dollar for something that's going to last and give you the ability to make choices on the fly if you want, or basically set it and forget it and let it go, knowing that, hey, Genius is working for me when I want it to work for me. Because we've always said, best way to manage your energy is not to manage it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really the true definition of a smart home. It doesn't make any sense to put tape on a wound on a 100-year-old system. Most of the panels that we use today, or the designs are from 100 years ago. But the way I see this is as a foundational technology for the smart home to be built upon at the source, at the breaker level. That's really what impresses me, as the control that you can have on a breaker level. Speaking of, the power that you put into the hands of people and the lifestyle changes, can you talk about how this might enable living off the grid, so to speak? That's a big trend in the last couple decades, but how can this truly allow someone to be off the grid and make that go mainstream?
Well, that's a great question, Les, and I'm glad that you asked that. We have certain projects that we're working on right now where there's community solar and battery. And one of the fantastic things about Genius and the way it was developed is the Genius panel can actually work as its own utility. We now have dynamic pricing by the load. We have a revenue grade metering approved where we can apply different levels of pricing for different loads at different times. And we can also define the cost of a renewable resource, solar or battery, to help pay for the infrastructure to provide an ROI. So, the Genius panel can distribute this energy to every home connected to that community independently, all on its own. If the utility wishes to engage in that, they're more than welcome to join the party. If they don't want to, well, you could stay where you are. I think the market will dictate as more panels are being installed. Consumers have greater choice, compliance, and profitability for their own domain in their own home, to be able to choose, and not be told when and what time and how much you can use. For the builders too, it's a great differentiation perspective. I mean, the up and coming generation all want efficiency. They want energy control and management. Not only monitoring, we've been monitoring to death. We need proper control at that level that we can provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add that all of the benefits you get, you also get safety and resilience. Besides having the power in your hands, it's kind of impossible for utilities to provide a fail-safe like what you can. And speaking of that, retailers are actively, or utility retailers are trying to drive new partnerships and or consider how to adapt towards these new possibilities. What kind of industries and partnerships can be built around Koben Systems, and how can you work together with those existing models?
Well, I think when we look at the high level, retailers can become more customer centric, which is really what consumers want. To have the ability to interact with your customer from the basis of, this is what you're consuming, this is what you're using, this is what we can deliver. How can we improve that through programs like demand response, load management, or simply providing transparency and information that the consumer can act on, by themselves without having to be led or controlled on how to act. So I can see a lot of partnerships starting to emerge with a lot of the data-driven technology for applications such as blockchain, selling from one neighbor to another, which, by the way, the genius, we take close to 2,000 measurements very quickly at any given time. So from a data mining perspective, my God, we know when you use your washer, your dryer, your refrigerator, stove, for how long, and and for what period. So can you imagine that kind of data going back to a retailer or going back to an appliance manufacturer to be able to better the entire delivery of not only the appliance or the technology, but the whole experience. We've seen this with the iPhone and the data, and look at where we are today. So we need to take that type of approach and break those silos down when it comes to electricity and open all that information up. So there's many partnerships from hardware suppliers, software suppliers, complete integrated turnkey solutions. I think the utilities that embrace and recognize Musk is one of the best at doing that, where he's disrupted many industries, in a good way. People view disruption as very, very negative, but it's actually, it can be very positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And data is empowering. It's useful to corporations and businesses trying to identify efficient ways to do business, but also it can be empowering to the consumer, and business models and partnerships between the business and the consumer could be stronger. And speaking of that, there's this huge opportunity for people to be more satisfied with resiliency and to be happy about having this kind of control. How can a consumer be turned into an evangelist for a utility or a service provider?
Well, I think it comes back to a lot of the data and the experience and the positive outcome, because this is why people are getting into solar and battery, to be able to better their lifestyle, to protect their families, to protect their lifestyle, to live a more enriched life, and to take these experiences along with that data to pass that word along to your neighbor. Like I could tell you in my area, when you put up solar and it's visible on the roof, people, they do a lot of walking with their dogs and, family members, and they look and they'll stop and they'll stare. And you can almost see what they're thinking in their mind. Wow, look at that. Maybe we should do that. I wonder what's happening there in terms of energy savings. So a lot of these things I think are going through, especially in California. You have another really terrible thing happening with the fires and people losing livelihoods and lives, and it's a very dangerous thing. So if that message can get across, and if there's a utility that's involved that is also promoting and supporting this technology, I think it's a three-way win, as opposed to a win-lose scenario like we've had for quite some time. So if you had a great experience, what are you going to do? You're not going to hide it. You're going to tell people. If you saved $150 a month in your electricity bill that you could take your kids out or your family, for a treat or something, I mean, you'd enjoy that more rather than dishing out the $150, to a bill. So I think, collectively, they can spread the word. People will ask, well, are you a utility? Is it a utility? Oh, they supply it. So yeah, I think it's a part and parcel, and it just picks up the wheel and just spreads the word, and it keeps on going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, solar is contagious. I've talked to this about this with Scott Wynn from 17 Terawatts, and his company is focused on customer service in the solar industry, which has lots of room for improvement. And then I've also talked to a guy, Neil Soderstrom from Renblock, where being aware of when your energy is clean, or having essentially a green or a red light to say this power is clean or not, having that kind of information and that control in your actual home, right there for you to see and for it to be smart and automated, I think it's going to feel great. I think we're going to have not just solar be contagious, but Koben Systems be contagious, something people are excited about. I would know from myself and many blockchain enthusiasts that the ability to integrate blockchain with that data is going to be exciting for a lot of people. And that may seem like a wild idea to some, but it's happening already. So there's lots of exciting things about it. But on the utility side, as we get excited as consumers, how can utilities and service providers forecast supply and demand better? And what can this do to make their jobs, their lives, and their role better and easier?
Well, I think in the same manner as the homeowner can see all of the relevant data and act upon that data in real time, collectively. For instance, if we, do you remember that blackout in, I think it was 1999, 2000 in New York, and then it spanned into Canada and Ontario? If they had information, they could have prevented that with our panel. So if we take our panel, we put it into a home, we put it into a community, we put it into a jurisdiction, a state, nationwide, our panel has the unique ability to, after an outage, turn on sequentially to ensure that the inrush of energy is stable enough. And that has many other benefits where we don't have time to touch on here. But we could have prevented that. But so the same way that the panel works in the home for a homeowner, the utility can aggregate all that information and that data to improve their offering and their service back to that community, jurisdiction, or state. So it has a pyramidal effect, and it can go backwards and forwards because it's real-time two-way communication. So if the utility is better equipped with data and information, they can service their consumer, their customer, a lot better, reducing that churn rate and keeping happy customers.
Right, and that would ultimately prevent outages. And there's two thoughts I have, which is if utilities have spent billions of dollars for smart meters and they find value there, they could only find even greater value with the kind of data that you could provide. And I think we've talked about the smart meters being already outdated when you compare them to Genius. So would you rather be smart or a genius? So, right. But anyway, then the other thing is as the market moves forward, security and privacy and that data that's available really is going to be important to be kept safe. Can you explain on Koben Systems level
what factors there are for safety and security?
Well, safety and security, we can break those down into two separate components. The safety aspect, of course, our panel is all UL with all the regulatory bodies for general public consumption use. We have the ability to measure temperature, measure arc, spark, short circuit. We can define overloads and attach a timeline for that. We even have appliance fault tests so we can mitigate or protect the longevity of the appliance. So if it reaches certain thresholds, it'll actually shut appliances off. For equipment, phase balancing, which is very important when we're shifting from load or from source to source. Fires, basically, we can minimize a lot of the electrical fires that occur from an electrical perspective. A good example, we ran into this a few times where an electrician came in. There are rules about a breaker and how many endpoints that you should connect. Our panel has the fantastic ability to be able to detect the load, and if it crosses a threshold, shuts it down, sends you an alert. You can also define that. So from the security side and privacy, for instance, we have a very unique way of securing our system, which is basically unhackable. So, and part of that is, our intellectual properties. So, the homeowner keeps their information and can keep it private and can release it under agreement, or if they like to release it to a third party to better the service. Hacking wise, the way we do the software, we have very little software that resides in the panel, enough to operate the panel and the functions and all the circumstances. The rest is outside, which is heavily protected. So, we take the privacy and security aspects of that quite seriously. And to date, we have had many installed around the world. We have not yet had one issue when it comes to privacy or security. Even with electricity theft, we have a tamper mechanism in there that'll alert you that it's being tampered with in real time right now. So these are important things that I think are now starting to come to the surface as more and more microgrids, nanogrids, and consumers are purchasing a lot of technology to help in saving their costs and using greener energy.
Absolutely. Everything you describe here, Vic, it really is the future that we want. To be empowered and to have smart homes and to be safer and more secure and more resilient. And so we've kind of already talked about, to me, what is the future. I think Koben Systems and smart panels is the future. But could you tell us kind of more about the future? It sounds lovely. I like to hear about it. So could you tell us, what you think the future of energy looks like in general?
Well, I think, to summarize you've asked a lot of great questions. And we've touched on a lot of interesting points in terms of technology and our viewpoint and how we'd like to react to that marketplace. I think we can summarize it into 7 or 8 key points. And one is, the traditional utility model is changing very rapidly. There comes a point where they have to keep up if they want to participate. Living off-grid will become mainstream. I think that's very evident today, especially in islands, California, other places in Europe. Customers are becoming energy experts because of the ability to diagnose and triage, if you want to call that, or simply obtain the information necessary to make those good choices. Retailers will rely more on these digital services and products for them to better enable their customers for a better experience. Again, they'll drive new partnerships. Customers, again, will evangelize not only the utility, but what they're doing, their equipment, their technology. And forecasting of supply and demand, we see that with the new technology will give them that disaggregated information and data that will allow them to really pinpoint and say, at this time we can do that, at that time we can do this, for the betterment of all, and then privacy and security, which is a very important aspect, especially in our lives today. So I think the culmination of this and where the new world is heading from an electrical perspective, yes, we are in a huge transition, and it's evolving very, very quickly.
Yes, it's happening fast. I think we have COVID-19 to thank for this accelerated interest, but as well, we've been reminded that it's important to consider sustainability in general, and certainly, Koben Systems can play and is playing a huge role there. We always like to ask, in these challenging times, speaking of COVID-19,
Can you leave us with something uplifting or a favorite kind of quote?
Yeah, I've often thought of that because I've been asked that. I'm more of a fan of other quotes that I repeat a lot. But I think this goes back to our core and our competency right from the beginning is, a couple simple words: build smart, live smart. Yeah, they're interchangeable, and I think they touch on the point quite well.
Yeah, that's very simple, simply genius. And, I think that what we're all trying to accomplish, sustainability and being smart, living smart, I think it's more easily achieved. It really is a groundbreaking technology at Koben Systems, and the power that it puts in the hands of the consumer, as well as the tools that it puts on the belt for the developer, and the peace of mind it'll provide to the utilities and the community and the world in general is very significant. I encourage our audience to check out kobensystems.com. As I indicated, at the beginning of the show, Vic's a great guy. He's a source of support for the show. So if you're a builder, a developer, or a utility, I encourage you to check out Koben Systems and get that conversation started today. I really appreciate your time, Vic. I appreciate your support for the show. I appreciate you coming on and giving us these insights and sharing your wisdom and hope for the future.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Les. You're more than welcome. I've enjoyed our interactions since the beginning, and we look forward to doing a lot more with you. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. And that's it for the Energy Independence Show. Feel free to like, comment, share, and follow. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.